I stood in the courtroom with my hands shaking, trying not to cry, when my daughter-in-law stepped forward and said, "Your Honor, she has dementia. She cannot even recognize her own son anymore." My son nodded, like her words were the truth. The entire courtroom turned toward me with pity, as if I was already gone. The judge leaned forward and asked, "Ma'am, do you understand what is happening here today?" I reached into my bag, pulled out a thick red folder, placed it on the table, and said, "Your Honor, I have been recording every conversation for 3 years." When I opened the folder and pressed play on the first recording, the room went silent. My name is Marion Cole. I am 67 years old, and before this courtroom battle started, I lived a peaceful life in the same Michigan home where I raised my son. I lost my husband Harold 8 years ago, and after his passing, I learned how to stand on my own. I spent 30 years working as a librarian, and I loved my job because I loved helping people feel seen and understood. My only child, Tyler, was the center of my world from the day he was born. I raised him with patience, long nights of reading, and steady guidance. When he married Dana, I tried my best to welcome her, even though something about her felt cold and rehearsed. As the years passed, I noticed her becoming more controlling. She visited often, not to spend time with me, but to check my cabinets, comment on my belongings, and ask questions about my finances. When items began disappearing and Dana blamed my age, something inside me tightened. I knew I needed to protect myself, especially after I overheard her telling Tyler, "She is getting old. Someone needs to take over." It hurt deeply, but it also opened my eyes. That night, I decided to record any conversation that made me feel unsafe. I kept every recording labeled and stored in a red folder, unsure if I would ever need them. When the guardianship papers arrived, claiming I was confused and unable to care for myself, I felt betrayed in a way I never imagined my own son was. But I reminded myself that the truth was in that folder, and I would not let fear decide my future. If you are enjoying the story so far, make sure to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. The conflict truly began months before the courtroom hearing, long before I realized just how far my own son and his wife were willing to go. It started with small moments that I tried to explain away, like the time I walked into my kitchen and found Dana standing on a chair checking the top cabinets, or when I noticed that my wedding ring set was missing from the wooden box, where I had kept it for decades. When I asked Dana if she had seen it, she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You probably forgot where you put it." Her tone was firm, almost annoyed, as if my concern was proof of a failing mind. At first, I doubted myself because aging can make anyone forget a thing or two, but then other odd things began happening. I would find drawers open when I never opened them. Important papers seemed to move around the house without explanation. Bills I had already paid were pulled out and placed on the counter with sticky notes that said, "Due soon." I began feeling watched in my own home, as if someone wanted me to believe I was losing control. Tyler, who had always been patient with me, slowly started repeating Dana's comments. He would say, "Mom, you need to be more careful," or, "Mom, you already told me that last week," even when I knew I had not. The worst moment came when I overheard the two of them talking in my living room while they thought I was asleep. Dana said, "If she slips up even a little bit, we can file for guardianship. The house alone is worth enough to make this worth it." Tyler hesitated, but eventually said, "She will not fight us. She trusts me too much." Hearing those words from my own son felt like a punch to the chest. In that moment, I realized this was not just about control. This was about them taking everything Harold and I built, even if it meant destroying me to get it. I sat on the edge of my bed, shaking, trying to decide whether to confront them, but something told me to stay quiet and protect myself. That night, I took out the little digital recorder I had bought years ago for documenting family memories. I decided to use it for something very different. I told myself, if they are planning something, I will not let them twist my life into a lie. I recorded every suspicious conversation, every insult, hidden behind a fake smile, and every moment they spoke about my age like it was a weakness they planned to exploit. I saved each file carefully, labeling them by date and slipping them into the red folder I kept, locked in a drawer under my bed. Over time, the recordings revealed their pattern. There were moments when Dana pressured Tyler by saying, "Your mother has had her time. We need that house now. Think about our future." Other recordings captured Tyler telling her, "We need proof. She is not stable." I listened to those clips late at night with tears in my eyes, trying to understand how the son I raised with love could be swayed so easily. The more I recorded, the more I saw how far they were willing to go. Dana encouraged me to take medications I did not need, hinting they were just vitamins, which frightened me enough that I stopped accepting anything she handed me. She would rearrange things in my home and then call Tyler, claiming I was confused. Once she even told my doctor during an appointment, "She has been forgetting things a lot lately," which forced me to speak up and say, "I am perfectly fine." Later that week, I found out they had contacted a lawyer without telling me. A few days after that, I received a formal letter in the mail. It was typed, signed, and stamped with court markings. The petition stated that I was mentally declining, unsafe living alone, and unable to manage my own finances. Reading those claims made my hands tremble. They described me as if I was a stranger who could not remember her own life, let alone her own son. I sat on my couch, holding that letter, the room spinning around me. I felt betrayed, heartbroken, and angry all at once. It felt like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. I called my sister Renee, who rushed over immediately. She read the letter, shook her head, and said, "Marion, they want control over everything you own. You cannot let them do this to you." She encouraged me to fight back instead of giving up, and her strength helped me breathe again. That evening, I made a decision. I gathered every recording, every transcript, and every document I had saved over the years. I put them all into the red folder and told myself, if they want a battle, I will show them the truth. From that moment on, I prepared not just to defend myself, but to expose everything they had tried to hide. The turning point came the day I realized that staying silent would only give Tyler and Dana more power over my life. After receiving the guardianship petition in the mail, I sat at my kitchen table for hours, trying to calm the pressure building in my chest. My hands kept shaking as I reread the claims they made about me, each sentence more insulting than the last. According to them, I could not manage my money. I could not maintain my home, and I could not remember simple tasks without help. None of it was true. I cooked my own meals, paid every bill on time, and kept my home clean and organized. It felt like they were trying to take my independence from me, not because I needed care, but because my house and savings were valuable to them. The more I thought about it, the more I knew I could not walk into the courtroom unprepared. I had to approach this the same way I handled everything else in my life, calmly, carefully, and with evidence that could not be twisted. I opened the red folder on my bed and spread the recordings across the blanket. Each file represented a moment when they tried to break me down, moments that I had quietly collected to make sure I never doubted myself again. I listened to every recording one by one, labeling them with dates and short summary. Some made my stomach turn. I heard Dana encouraging Tyler to pressure me into signing papers I had never seen. I heard Tyler telling her that taking guardianship would be easy if she keeps acting confused, even though I had never shown him any confusion. Every recording painted a clear picture of intentional manipulation. Once I finished organizing everything, I printed transcripts of the most important clips. I handled each page like it was a piece of armor. The next step was going over my financial record. I pulled out bank statements from the past 2 years, all neatly filed, showing every payment made on time. I placed them in a binder and added notes to show how I managed everything myself. Then I collected household records, including receipts for repairs I arranged and paid for without anyone's help. I wanted to make sure no one could claim I was incapable. The more I worked, the stronger I felt. My fear slowly transformed into determination. When I finished gathering the documents, I drove to see my doctor, Dr. Harris, a kind man who had known me for many years. I told him what was happening, and he listened with genuine concern. After a short evaluation, he wrote a detailed statement confirming that I showed no signs of dementia or cognitive decline. He handed it to me and said, "Marion, you are clear-headed and independent. Do not let them take advantage of you." His support gave me a deeper sense of courage. With his statement in hand, I went to meet the attorney my sister recommended, Jacob Miles. His office was small and simple, which made me feel more comfortable than walking into a large firm. When I sat across from him and explained everything, he did not rush me or look doubtful. He said, "You are not the first person to face this kind of situation, but you are one of the few who came prepared." I slid the red folder across the table, and when he opened it and read the descriptions on the transcripts, his eyebrows rose. He listened to several recordings right there in the office, shaking his head as he heard Dana's voice saying, "She will not stand in our way if we make her look incapable." When the recordings finished, Jacob leaned back and said, "You have everything you need to defend yourself. This is strong evidence." He helped me create a clear timeline that showed how the manipulation had grown. He also prepared a counterclaim that stated I was mentally competent and being targeted for financial gain. We met several times over the next week, reviewing the evidence, practicing how I would answer questions, and going over every detail until I felt steady. The night before the hearing, I sat in my bedroom holding a framed photo of Harold. I looked at his warm smile and whispered, "I wish you were here to help me stay brave." Even though he was gone, thinking about how he always encouraged me made me feel grounded. I placed the photo on my nightstand, took a deep breath, and told myself, "Tomorrow, I speak for myself. Tomorrow, I show the truth." When the sun rose the next morning, I put on my best jacket, tied my hair back neatly, and slipped the red folder into my bag. As I walked out the door, I felt something I had not felt in a long time, the strength to fight for my own life. Walking into the courtroom felt like stepping onto a stage where everyone had already decided the ending, and I was the only one still trying to understand the script. The judge sat high above the room with a serious, unreadable expression, while Tyler and Dana stood together near their attorney, whispering as if they were confident the outcome was already set. I sat beside my own attorney, Jacob, clutching the red folder in my lap. My heart pounded, but I reminded myself that Harold would have wanted me to stand strong. The judge began by asking Tyler's attorney to present their case first, and what I heard made my stomach twist. Their attorney described me as a confused, declining woman who could not live alone safely. He spoke slowly, using phrases like mental instability and danger to herself, words that felt like daggers thrown into the air. When he finished, he stepped aside, and Dana walked forward with a smooth, practiced expression. She placed a hand on her chest and spoke in a soft voice meant to sound caring. "Your Honor, this is not easy for her," she said, "but she cannot remember basic things. She forgets conversations. She misplaces items. She gets confused about time. We are simply trying to protect her." Tyler nodded solemnly beside her, refusing to look at me. Hearing my own son support a lie so calmly made something inside me break, but it also made something stronger rise up in its place. When the judge turned to me and asked, "Ma'am, do you understand what is happening here today?" The entire room seemed to lean forward, waiting for me to stumble. Instead, I placed the red folder on the table, opened it carefully, and said, "Yes, Your Honor, I understand exactly what is happening." I pulled out the first USB drive and handed it to Jacob, who gave it to the court clerk. The judge allowed it to be played, and the first audio recording filled the silent room. It was Dana's voice, clear and sharp, saying, "If we get guardianship, we can sell the house and split the money. She will not even realize it." Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Dana's face drained of color, and Tyler stared at the floor. The judge lifted a hand to stop anyone from speaking and said, "Continue the recording." The next clip played, and this time it was Tyler's voice saying, "Mom is fine, but we need something to use. Maybe act like she keeps forgetting things." The judge's eyebrows drew together as he listened. My fingers trembled slightly, but I kept my back straight. Jacob then handed the judge a thick set of transcripts and medical statements proving I was fully mentally capable. The judge flipped through the pages, his expression growing more severe with each one. When he looked up again, his eyes were fixed on Tyler and Dana. "Would you like to explain this?" he asked sternly. Dana stuttered, tried to speak, then fell silent as tears she forced out began to streak down her face. Her attorney attempted to cover the damage, claiming the recordings were taken out of context, but the judge cut him off. "This is not confusion. This is clear evidence of manipulation." Tyler finally lifted his head, and his eyes met mine for the first time. Instead of guilt, I saw fear running across his face. He whispered, "Mom, I did not mean for it to go this far." I held his gaze without blinking. The judge then turned to me and asked if I wished to make a final statement. I stood slowly, placing my hand on the table to steady myself, and said, "Your Honor, I know exactly who my son is. I know his voice. I know his words. And despite what they claimed today, I recognize him perfectly." The room went silent again, but this time the silence felt powerful rather than heavy. The judge nodded slightly, acknowledging the weight of my words, and announced his ruling. He said the guardianship petition was denied. He also stated that the court would be forwarding the case for investigation into financial exploitation and fraud. The sound of his gavel felt like a door slamming shut on the fear that had followed me for months. As the judge dismissed everyone, Dana rushed toward Tyler and whispered angrily, her mask completely gone. Tyler tried once more to apologize, but I walked past him with my head lifted high. I did not yell. I did not argue. I simply said, "Your choices brought you here." When I stepped out of the courtroom doors, sunlight hit my face, and for the first time in a long while, I felt free. The truth had finally spoken louder than their lies, and I knew my life was mine again. When I walked out of the courthouse, the cool air felt different on my skin, almost like I had stepped into a new life. For months, I had lived in fear that I would lose everything: my home, my independence, and the dignity I had worked hard to hold on to. But as I stood at the top of the courthouse steps, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Renee came up beside me and wrapped an arm around me, saying, "You did it, Marion. You stood up for yourself." Hearing those words made my chest warm because for the first time in a long while, I believed them. I watched people stream out of the building whispering about what had happened inside. Some glanced at me with respect, others with surprise. I realized then that many had expected the fragile woman Dana described, not someone who could defend herself with clear proof. When Jacob returned my red folder and shook my hand, he said, "You should be proud. Most people in your position do not have your strength." I thanked him sincerely because I knew he meant it, and I knew I could not have faced this battle alone. As Renee and I walked toward her car, I noticed Tyler and Dana standing near the parking lot, arguing. Their voices rose sharply, but their anger no longer frightened me. It no longer held any power over me. Tyler saw me approaching and stepped forward, as if he wanted to talk. His eyes were red, and for a brief moment, he looked like the little boy I raised, the one who used to hug me after school and tell me about his day. But that image faded when I remembered the recordings, the lies, and the petition he willingly signed to strip away my freedom. He opened his mouth and said, "Mom, I made a mistake." His voice cracked, but I kept my expression steady. "A mistake is forgetting a birthday, Tyler," I said softly. "What you did was a choice." He lowered his eyes, unable to argue. Dana glared at me with a coldness that sent a small chill down my spine, but I met her stare without blinking. She turned away, tugging Tyler by the sleeve, but he remained frozen for a moment longer before following her. Watching them walk away was painful, but it was also necessary. Loving someone does not mean accepting betrayal. I climbed into Renee's car, and as she drove us back to my house, I looked out the window at the familiar streets of my neighborhood. The houses, the trees, the small playground nearby, all of it reminded me how much life I still had to live. When we reached my driveway, I paused before getting out. My house looked exactly the same as it always had, but for the first time in months, it felt like home again. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, the same table where I had once cried, reading that guardianship petition. Now, I spread out the documents that proved my independence, along with the court's ruling, and placed them neatly in a new binder. I kept the red folder beside it, not out of fear, but as a reminder of the strength it took to gather my truth piece by piece. Over the next few days, I began reclaiming my life. I called my bank, updated passwords, and changed the locks on my doors. I visited my doctor again, not because I was confused or scared, but because I wanted a fresh start with a clean file. I even returned to the library where I used to work, offering to volunteer twice a week. The smell of books and the soft hum of quiet conversation brought back a sense of peace I had missed. One afternoon, my grandson Leo came to visit. He threw his arms around me and said, "Grandma, Dad said you were really brave." Hearing that from a child who saw the truth without needing explanations healed a part of me that had felt broken. I baked cookies with him, just like I used to, and as we laughed in the kitchen, I realized that even though Tyler had made his choices, I still had love in my life, and I still had reasons to keep going. In the garden behind my house, I planted a small row of lavender, a plant Harold used to love because it reminded him of calm summer morning. As I pressed the soil around the roots, I whispered, "I made it, Harold. I protected the life we built." My story did not end with victory over my son. It ended with the understanding that growing older does not mean losing your voice. It does not mean letting others decide your worth. It means standing firm when life tries to shake you and trusting that truth will speak louder than deception. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to my channel and comment where you are watching from.